At 3 a.m., I overheard my son-in-law on the phone. The meds are making her confused. Tomorrow I'll get her committed, then I just need to get rid of my wife and all that money is ours. My blood ran cold, but I knew exactly what to do. Let's just say he got a big surprise during his morning shower. But first, let me tell you how this nightmare began. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. 3 months ago, my world started crumbling when Dr. Morrison prescribed new blood pressure medication. The first week was hell, honestly. I was dizzy, disoriented, bumping into furniture like some kind of drunk sailor. I'd put my coffee cup down and forget where I'd left it 5 minutes later. I couldn't remember if I'd locked the front door or turned off the stove. Normal adjustment period, Dr. Morrison assured me, but my son-in-law Brandon saw golden opportunity dancing before his greedy little eyes. Mom's really declining fast, he told my daughter Sarah over dinner that first night, his voice dripping with perfectly practiced concern. Maybe we should start researching memory care facilities before this gets worse. I was sitting right there at the kitchen table, mind you, but apparently I'd become invisible. Just another piece of furniture he needed to dispose of. Sarah, bless her trusting heart, looked genuinely worried as she glanced between Brandon and me. "Do you really think it's that serious already?" she asked, reaching over to squeeze my hand. "Mom's always been so sharp. These cognitive declines can progress incredibly quickly at her age," Brandon replied, cutting his perfectly grilled steak with surgical precision. The man even ate like a sociopath. "We need to be proactive about this situation. Waiting too long could put everyone at risk." The medication side effects leveled out completely after 2 weeks, exactly like Dr. Morrison had predicted. But Brandon's systematic campaign against my sanity was just getting started. He began documenting everything, creating incidents out of thin air, building his case with the methodical patience of a true predator. "Margaret forgot to turn off the stove again," he'd announced to Sarah when she came home from her 12-hour nursing shifts, even though I hadn't used the stove that day. "Found her wandering around the backyard in her nightgown at 2 in the morning, he'd report with deep concern, when I'd simply gone outside to check on my prize-winning roses. Sarah worked brutal hours at the hospital, pulling double shifts to cover for understaffed departments. She'd come home exhausted, emotionally drained from dealing with sick patients and their families all day. She was the perfect target for Brandon's manipulation because she trusted her husband completely and didn't have the energy to verify his stories. Every evening became the same routine. Brandon would greet Sarah at the door with fresh reports of my latest incidents, rubbing her shoulders while she unwound from another hellish day. "I'm getting really worried about leaving her alone during the day," he'd say, his voice heavy with fake burden. "What if she falls down the stairs? What if she forgets to lock the doors and someone breaks in? What if she starts a fire?" My daughter, God love her naive soul, believed every single word. She started watching me with those careful, pitying looks that adult children give aging parents when they're planning to ship them off somewhere. The same exact look I'd once given my own mother before Alzheimer's actually took her mind. But here's what Brandon didn't realize. I wasn't declining at all. I was paying very close attention to everything happening around me. And late Tuesday night, when he thought I was safely unconscious upstairs, I discovered exactly what kind of monster my daughter had married. The old house creaked and groaned as I crept down the stairs at 2:47 a.m., my bladder demanding immediate attention despite every instinct telling me to stay hidden in my bedroom. That's when I heard Brandon's voice drifting from the kitchen, low and urgent, like he was sharing state secrets. "She's positioned exactly where we need her to be right now," he was saying into his phone. "Confused enough that nobody will question the commitment papers when we file them, but still mentally competent enough to sign legal documents if we time this whole thing perfectly." I pressed myself against the hallway wall, my heart hammering so violently I was certain he'd hear it echoing through the house. 38 years of marriage to my late husband Frank had taught me the crucial difference between when to listen carefully and when to speak up. This was definitely a shut up and listen moment. "The commitment hearing is already scheduled for Thursday morning," Brandon continued, his voice filled with the kind of satisfaction that made my skin crawl. "Dr. Peterson owes me a substantial favor from our medical school days. He's agreed to testify that she's become a clear danger to herself and others. Once she's officially declared mentally incompetent, I can petition the court for complete power of attorney over all her financial assets. There was a long pause, while whoever he was talking to responded. I could hear the faint sound of another voice through the phone, but couldn't make out the words. Sarah? Brandon actually laughed, and the sound was like fingernails on a chalkboard. Poor Sarah will be absolutely devastated at first, of course, but she'll get over it eventually, especially when she realizes we're finally free from this burden. No more confused elderly woman shuffling around our house in her bathrobe. No more constant worry about what crazy, dangerous thing she might do next. Another pause. Longer this time. The life insurance policy alone is worth $2.3 million. Plus, her personal savings account and the house, which Frank apparently left entirely to her. Turns out the old cop was much better with money than anyone realized. Poor naive Sarah has absolutely no idea how wealthy her mother actually is. My legs nearly buckled underneath me. Frank and I had been extremely careful with our finances over the years, living modestly and investing wisely, but I'd never shared the full extent of our nest egg with Sarah. We'd always planned to leave her everything, but we wanted her to build her own life first, not depend on inheritance money. Once Margaret's permanently out of the picture, we can finally start the life we've always dreamed about, Brandon continued. Travel the world, buy that beach house in Florida you keep talking about. Live like the wealthy couple we're meant to be. Sarah's too soft-hearted and sentimental to ever put her own mother away herself. But once the decision's been made for her, she'll eventually see it was absolutely for the best. The casual, matter-of-fact way he discussed my death sent ice through my veins. This wasn't just about stealing my money, though that was clearly his primary motivation. This was about completely eliminating an inconvenience from his perfect life. No, absolutely not. She cannot be allowed to linger indefinitely in the psychiatric facility, Brandon said firmly. That would be far too expensive long-term, and there's too much risk that she might recover enough mental clarity to cause serious problems for us. I'm thinking 6 months maximum, maybe even less than that. These places are absolutely notorious for medication errors, accidental falls, sudden unexplained declines in elderly patients. Tragic and heartbreaking, but definitely not suspicious to outside observers. I'd heard more than enough. My son-in-law was methodically planning to murder me, and he was using my own beloved daughter as his unwitting accomplice in the scheme. I somehow made it back to my bedroom without incident, but sleep was absolutely impossible after what I'd overheard. Instead, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind racing as I formulated a plan. Brandon thought he was dealing with a confused, helpless old woman, but Frank had trained me well during his 25 years as a police detective. I understood exactly how predators operated, and more importantly, I knew how to think like one when necessary. First priority, I needed solid, irrefutable evidence of Brandon's conspiracy. He was clearly too intelligent to leave obvious traces of his criminal plan lying around, but everyone makes crucial mistakes when they feel completely secure and untouchable. He thought I was harmless and mentally declining, which would ultimately prove to be his fatal miscalculation. Second priority, I needed reliable allies who could help me execute my counterplan. Sarah was completely compromised, whether she realized it or not, but I had other resources available that Brandon knew nothing about. Third priority, I needed to act fast and decisively. If the commitment hearing was really scheduled for Thursday morning, I had less than 36 hours to completely destroy his scheme and expose the truth. At exactly 6 a.m., I heard Brandon's alarm clock buzzing through the wall. His daily routine was boringly predictable. Coffee and news first, then a luxurious 30-minute shower while listening to financial podcasts on his waterproof speaker. The man was nothing if not completely consistent in his narcissistic self-absorption. I waited patiently until I heard the bathroom door close and the shower water start running at full pressure. Then I moved quickly and silently. Brandon's iPhone was charging on the kitchen counter where he always left it, and he was embarrassingly careless about his security passcode. I'd watched him enter it dozens of times over the past few months. 0824, his own birthday. Men like Brandon always chose passwords that revolved entirely around themselves and their inflated egos. The phone unlocked perfectly on my very first attempt. His recent call log showed multiple lengthy conversations with someone listed simply as D. Peterson between midnight and 3:30 a.m. Dr. Peterson, obviously. I quickly took clear photos of the entire call log with my own phone, then carefully scrolled through his text message history. What I discovered there made my blood run completely cold with rage. Package delivered exactly as promised. Read one message from 3 weeks earlier. She should be properly confused and disoriented within 72 hours of first dose. The response came back immediately. Perfect timing for escalation. Sarah's working double shifts all week. Won't notice the behavioral changes. Another exchange from just last week made my hands shake with fury. Commitment papers officially filed under emergency mental health provisions. Judge Morrison is very sympathetic to elder abuse cases, especially when family safety is genuinely concerned. Excellent work. Once she's declared legally incompetent, how quickly can we move forward on the other matter we discussed? Patience, my friend. These things absolutely must appear completely natural to outside observers, but I'd estimate 6 months maximum timeline. After that, you'll be free to start your new life with a clear conscience. I photographed every single message, my hands remaining perfectly steady despite the murderous rage building in my chest. Frank used to say that anger was just raw energy waiting for proper direction and focus. I was about to give mine some very clear, very specific direction. By 7 a.m. sharp, I was fully dressed and ready to implement the first phase of my carefully planned counterattack. Brandon emerged from his shower looking relaxed and supremely confident, humming some annoying tune while he knotted his expensive silk tie with practiced precision. "Good morning, Margaret," he said with that sickeningly fake smile I'd grown to absolutely despise. "How are you feeling today? Any more confusion or disorientation?" "Oh, you know how it is," I replied, letting my voice sound appropriately vague and uncertain. "Some days are definitely better than others, I suppose." "Of course they are," he said, patting my shoulder with condescending gentleness that made my skin crawl. "That's perfectly normal for someone in your particular condition. Nothing to worry about." Sarah rushed through the kitchen like a tornado, grabbing her travel coffee mug and a granola bar for breakfast. "I'm covering Janet's shift again today, so I'll be home really late tonight. Brandon, can you keep a close eye on Mom for me?" "Absolutely, darling," Brandon replied smoothly, slipping his arm around Sarah's waist with practiced affection. "We'll have a nice quiet day together, won't we, Margaret?" I nodded absently, playing my assigned role perfectly. "That sounds absolutely lovely, dear." The moment Sarah's car pulled out of the driveway, Brandon's entire demeanor shifted dramatically. The fake warmth and concern disappeared instantly, replaced by cold, calculating assessment. "Margaret, we really need to have a serious discussion about your future living arrangements," he said, settling across from me at the kitchen table with businesslike efficiency. "Sarah and I have been talking extensively, and we both think it's definitely time to explore some better options for your ongoing care and supervision." "What kind of options?" I asked, making my voice sound smaller and more fragile than usual. "Well, there are some truly excellent facilities that specialize specifically in memory care and cognitive decline," he explained, sliding a glossy brochure across the table toward me. "Places where you'd have round-the-clock professional supervision, structured activities designed specifically for people with your condition, and immediate medical care available whenever you need it." I picked up the brochure with appropriately shaky hands. Sunset Manor read the cover in cheerful script, featuring staged photos of smiling elderly people engaged in arts and crafts activities. It looked pleasant enough on the surface, but I knew it was just the first stop on Brandon's planned journey to my grave. "This looks quite expensive," I said, letting genuine worry creep into my voice. "Don't you worry about financial considerations," Brandon replied with oily smoothness. "Your health insurance will cover the majority of costs, and Sarah and I can easily handle whatever's left over. The important thing is getting you the professional help and supervision you clearly need." I studied the brochure more carefully, noting the admission requirements listed in small print on the back page. Physician referral required for all admissions, and more ominously, involuntary commitment provisions available for cases involving immediate patient safety concerns. "When exactly would this transition happen?" I asked with appropriate trepidation. "Very soon," Brandon said, barely concealing his eagerness. "Possibly as early as this week, if we can expedite the paperwork. We've already spoken with a qualified doctor who can properly evaluate your condition and make the necessary medical recommendations." Dr. Peterson, obviously. I wondered exactly how much money Brandon was paying him for this particular favor. I suppose if you and Sarah both think it's truly for the best, I said, letting resignation and defeat color my voice perfectly. Brandon's predatory smile returned full force. We absolutely do, Margaret. We really, truly do. Now why don't you go upstairs and rest for a while? I have several important phone calls to make. Wednesday morning arrived gray and drizzly, perfectly matching the dark mood that had settled over our house like a suffocating blanket. Brandon had been on the phone until well past midnight, presumably finalizing all the arrangements for my imminent imprisonment and eventual murder. He woke up positively cheerful, practically bouncing down the stairs while humming that same irritating tune from the day before. The man was clearly giddy with anticipation of his upcoming victory. "What a beautiful day," he announced brightly, though anyone with working eyes could see it was absolutely miserable outside with dark storm clouds gathering. "If you say so, dear," I replied, maintaining my confused elderly woman act flawlessly. Brandon poured himself coffee from the expensive machine he'd insisted we needed, then checked his phone messages with obvious satisfaction. His fingers moved quickly across the screen, probably confirming final details with his co-conspirators. "I have several important errands to run this morning," he announced, without looking up from his phone. "But I should definitely be back by lunchtime. Will you be perfectly all right here, alone for a few hours?" "I think so," I said with appropriate uncertainty, "though I do get confused sometimes about what I'm supposed to be doing during the day." "Of course you do," he said absently, his mind already focused elsewhere. "Just rest comfortably, Margaret. Don't worry yourself about anything important." The moment Brandon's car disappeared around the corner, I moved into action with military precision. I had perhaps 3 hours before he returned, and I needed to use every single minute efficiently. My first stop was First National Bank, where Frank and I had maintained our primary accounts for over 30 years. But what Brandon didn't know was that Frank had always insisted on maintaining backup accounts at multiple different institutions, a habit that had seemed unnecessarily paranoid at the time but was proving absolutely invaluable now. I transferred substantial funds between accounts, established new accounts with completely different access codes, and arranged for automatic bill payments to ensure my financial obligations would continue being met regardless of what happened to me personally. My second stop was much more important, meeting with Detective Ray Collins, Frank's former partner, who had retired 2 years ago but remained sharp as a razor at 72 years old. "Maggie Walsh," Ray said when I walked into the coffee shop where we'd arranged to meet privately. "You look like absolute hell. What's wrong?" I'd known Ray would cut straight to the heart of the matter without wasting time on pleasantries. He and Frank had been partners for 15 years, and he'd never been one for unnecessary small talk or social niceties. "I need help, Ray," I said without preamble. "Someone is actively trying to kill me, and I need to stop them before they succeed." Ray's expression didn't change visibly, but I saw his entire posture shift into alert, professional mode. "Tell me absolutely everything from the beginning." I laid out the complete story systematically, showing him the clear photos of Brandon's incriminating text messages and suspicious call logs. Ray listened without interruption, occasionally asking for clarification on specific timing or crucial details. "Son of a bitch," he said quietly when I finished my account. "Frank would have absolutely crucified this bastard." "Frank's not here to help me," I said simply. "But I am, and I'm definitely not going down without one hell of a fight." Ray grinned suddenly, and for a moment I saw the young, aggressive detective who'd been Frank's closest friend and most trusted backup. "What exactly do you need from me?" "I need this bastard caught completely red-handed with irrefutable evidence," I said. "But more importantly than that, I need Sarah to see with her own eyes exactly who she really married." Thursday morning, the day of my supposedly inevitable commitment hearing, dawned bright and clear with brilliant sunshine streaming through our kitchen windows. Brandon was practically vibrating with barely contained excitement as he prepared for what he obviously believed would be his complete and total victory. "Today's a very big day for everyone," he told me over breakfast, his fake concern barely concealing his obvious eagerness to be rid of me permanently. "We're finally going to get you the professional help and supervision you desperately need." "I'm honestly quite frightened," I said, letting my voice tremble convincingly. "What if I don't like it there? What if the other patients are mean to me? You'll adjust to the new environment eventually, Brandon said dismissively, already mentally counting his anticipated windfall. Everyone does, given enough time and proper medication. His phone buzzed with an incoming message, and he glanced at the screen with obvious satisfaction. Dr. Peterson will meet us at the courthouse at exactly 10 o'clock. The whole process should be very straightforward and efficient. What Brandon had absolutely no way of knowing was that Ray had spent the previous evening making some very interesting phone calls of his own. Judge Morrison, it turned out, was an old friend from Frank's police days who had been extremely interested to hear about the highly suspicious circumstances surrounding this particular commitment petition. Dr. Peterson was about to have a very memorable morning that he'd probably spend the rest of his life regretting. "I really should shower and get properly dressed before we leave," Brandon announced, checking his expensive watch. "Important legal proceedings call for looking professional and respectable." "Of course, dear," I replied with perfect meekness. Brandon headed upstairs, whistling that same infuriating tune he'd been humming all week. I waited patiently until I heard the bathroom door close securely and the shower water start running at full pressure. Then I picked up my cell phone and sent a single, prearranged text message. "It's time to spring the trap." Within minutes, I heard multiple car doors slamming in our driveway. Ray had brought substantial backup, exactly as we'd carefully planned. But more importantly, he'd brought someone whose presence would change absolutely everything about Brandon's perfect morning. The doorbell rang, and I answered it with a smile that had absolutely nothing confused or frail about it whatsoever. "Good morning, Detective Morrison," I said warmly to the tall professional woman in the crisp police uniform. "And Detective Patterson. Thank you both so much for coming on such short notice." Ray stood behind them with his arms crossed, grinning like a wolf who'd just cornered his prey. "Just like the old days, Maggie, except this time you're running the entire operation." From upstairs, Brandon's voice called down cheerfully, "Margaret, who's at the front door?" "Just some old friends, dear," I called back sweetly. "Don't mind us at all." The shower was still running at full pressure. Brandon had absolutely no idea that his perfectly orchestrated morning was about to become something completely different than he'd planned. Detective Morrison checked her watch professionally. "He should be in there for another 15 minutes based on his established routine, at least," I confirmed with satisfaction. "The man is absolutely nothing if not completely predictable in his self-centered habits." "Perfect. That gives us plenty of time to set up all the recording equipment and get everyone positioned exactly where they need to be." As the detectives moved efficiently through my house, preparing to catch Brandon in his own carefully woven web of lies and criminal conspiracy, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: pure, undiluted hope, and just a little bit of anticipatory satisfaction at the thought of seeing Brandon's face when he discovered that the confused, helpless old woman he'd been systematically manipulating had actually been 3 steps ahead of him all along. The shower shut off at exactly 8:47 a.m., just like clockwork. Brandon's morning routine was so predictable you could literally set your watch by it. Detective Morrison positioned herself strategically by the bathroom door, while Detective Patterson waited in the master bedroom with professional recording equipment. Ray and I stood in the hallway, watching this carefully orchestrated drama unfold. "Margaret," Brandon called from behind the locked bathroom door. "Can you bring me a clean towel? I forgot to grab one from the linen closet." This was absolutely perfect, better than I'd even dared to hope for in my wildest dreams. "Of course, dear," I called back sweetly, walking toward the linen closet with exaggerated helpfulness. But instead of grabbing a towel, I turned the external lock on the bathroom door. Frank had installed that particular lock years ago when our grandson Tommy was staying with us during summer vacation, to prevent him from accidentally locking himself inside. Brandon tried the door handle several times, clearly confused. "Margaret, the door seems to be stuck somehow." "Oh my," I said, with perfectly feigned innocence. "That old lock must be acting up again." Detective Morrison stepped forward, her badge clearly visible and her voice carrying complete authority. "Mr. Hayes, this is Detective Morrison with the Ohio State Police. We'd like to ask you some questions about your recent activities." The silence from behind the bathroom door was absolutely deafening. "What the hell is going on out there?" Brandon finally shouted, his voice cracking with panic. "Margaret, open this door immediately." "I'm afraid I can't do that, Brandon," I said, dropping the confused elderly woman act entirely. "You see, last night I had the most fascinating conversation with some old friends about conspiracy to commit fraud and attempted murder." More silence, followed by frantic rattling of the door handle. "I don't know what you think you're talking about," Brandon called through the door, desperation creeping into his voice. "You're obviously confused, Margaret. Your medication is making you paranoid and delusional." Detective Patterson held up the recording device, nodding to indicate it was capturing every word of our conversation. "Actually, I'm feeling remarkably clear-headed today," I replied calmly. "Clear enough to remember every single word of your phone conversation Tuesday night. You know, the one where you discussed having me falsely committed so you could steal my money and then arrange for my convenient death?" A loud thump came from behind the door, followed by what sounded like Brandon desperately trying to force the handle or break down the door itself. "Mr. Hayes," Detective Morrison called professionally, "we have substantial evidence of your communications with Dr. Peterson regarding fraudulent commitment proceedings. We also have your text messages discussing specific plans to harm Mrs. Walsh. I strongly suggest you cooperate fully with this investigation." "This is absolutely insane," Brandon shouted, his voice now high-pitched with panic. "Sarah! Sarah, where are you? Your mother has completely lost her mind." Sarah arrived exactly 15 minutes later, still wearing her hospital scrubs and her face pale with worry and confusion. She burst through the front door calling my name frantically, then stopped dead in her tracks when she saw the police officers standing in our hallway. "Mom? What's happening here? Ray said there was a family emergency and I needed to come home immediately." Ray stepped forward, his expression gentle but serious. "Sarah, honey, you need to sit down. We have some very important things to discuss." "Where's Brandon?" she asked, looking around frantically for her husband. "Is he hurt? Why won't you let him out?" "He's not hurt," I said carefully, "but he's not exactly available for conversation right now either." From behind the bathroom door came increasingly desperate shouting as Brandon continued trying to break his way out of his predicament. Sarah's eyes widened with alarm. "Is he trapped? Why won't you help him?" Detective Morrison took control of the situation. "Mrs. Hayes, we're currently investigating serious allegations of conspiracy to commit fraud and attempted murder. Your husband has been systematically planning to have your mother falsely committed to a psychiatric facility." The color drained completely from Sarah's face. "That's absolutely impossible. Brandon would never do anything like that. Mom needs professional help, yes, but he's been trying to find the best possible care for her." I sat down beside my daughter, taking her trembling hands in mine. "Sarah, sweetheart, I need you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you. I'm not confused or declining mentally. I haven't been having any cognitive problems. Everything Brandon told you about my condition was a carefully constructed lie." "But I saw you myself," Sarah protested desperately. "You were forgetting things, getting disoriented, acting strangely. The first week only. When I was adjusting to new blood pressure medication," I explained patiently. "But after that adjustment period ended, I was completely fine. Brandon was creating false incidents, documenting things that never actually happened, systematically building a case to have me declared mentally incompetent." Detective Patterson handed Sarah a tablet, displaying clear screenshots of Brandon's incriminating text messages. "These are communications between your husband and Dr. Peterson, discussing detailed plans to falsify medical evaluations and expedite involuntary commitment proceedings." Sarah scrolled through the messages with shaking hands, her face growing paler with each revelation. I watched my daughter's entire world crumble as she read her husband's casual words about getting rid of the inconvenient old woman and starting their new life with my substantial inheritance money. "The life insurance policy," she whispered in horror. "He asked me about your life insurance last month, said we should know about your policies in case something unexpected happened to you." $2.3 million, I confirmed grimly, plus personal savings and the house. He'd clearly done his financial homework very thoroughly. From behind the bathroom door, Brandon's voice took on a desperately pleading tone. "Sarah, don't listen to any of them. Your mother is having one of her serious episodes. She's completely paranoid and delusional. Remember what Dr. Peterson explained about elderly paranoid delusions?" Sarah's head snapped up sharply. "Dr. Peterson? But I've never actually met Dr. Peterson face to face. Brandon said he was consulting with him about Mom's condition, but I never spoke to him directly myself. Because Brandon controlled absolutely every piece of information you received about my supposed mental decline, I said gently. Detective Morrison finally unlocked the bathroom door, and Brandon emerged wearing only a towel around his waist, his face flushed bright red with anger, panic, and humiliation. He immediately focused on Sarah, switching instantly to his most persuasive and manipulative tone. "Thank God you're finally here," he said, moving toward her with practiced desperation. "Your mother has completely lost touch with reality. She's somehow convinced these people to participate in some kind of elaborate paranoid fantasy about conspiracies and murder plots." Sarah stood up slowly, the tablet containing his damning text messages still clutched in her trembling hands. "Brandon, I just finished reading your text messages. The ones about getting Mom committed, about accessing her money, about starting a new life together." Brandon's expression flickered momentarily, but he recovered with impressive speed. "Those messages are completely taken out of context, Sarah. I was simply discussing various options with Dr. Peterson, trying to find the best possible way to help your mother. Sometimes these difficult medical decisions require frank conversations about worst-case scenarios." "What about this specific message?" Sarah read directly from the tablet with a shaking voice. "Package delivered as promised. She should be properly confused within 72 hours. "What package were you referring to, Brandon?" The entire room went silent, except for the steady ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Brandon's mouth opened and closed several times, but no words emerged. Detective Patterson stepped forward with additional evidence. "Mr. Hayes, we've already spoken with your pharmacy connections about the unauthorized medications you've been systematically adding to your mother-in-law's morning coffee. The mild sedatives mixed with her prescribed blood pressure medication explain her initial confusion and disorientation." All the pieces suddenly clicked into place for Sarah. "The coffee," she whispered in dawning horror. "You always insisted on making Mom's coffee every morning. You said it was a thoughtful gesture, a nice way to start her day." "Sarah, you have to understand the bigger picture here," Brandon said desperately, his towel slipping as he gestured frantically. "I was trying to help our entire family. Your mother was becoming an impossible burden on our marriage, on our future plans. We couldn't possibly build the life we wanted with her constantly needing care and attention." "A burden?" Sarah's voice was deadly quiet now. "My mother gave us the entire down payment for this house. She babysits whenever we need her to. She helps with groceries and utilities when money gets tight. How exactly is she a burden on our family?" "You work such incredibly long hours," Brandon continued desperately, his manipulation techniques working overtime. "You're exhausted constantly. Without her endless needs weighing you down, we could travel the world. We could start fresh somewhere beautiful. I was thinking entirely of your happiness and well-being." Sarah actually laughed, but there was absolutely no humor in the sound. "My happiness? You were systematically planning to murder my mother for my happiness?" "I never used the word murder," Brandon protested weakly. "I simply said these psychiatric facilities sometimes have unfortunate accidents. People decline rapidly in institutional settings. It would have appeared completely natural to outside observers." Detective Morrison stepped forward with handcuffs. "Brandon Hayes, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, conspiracy to commit murder, and elder abuse." As Detective Morrison read Brandon his constitutional rights, I watched my daughter's face cycle rapidly through a devastating range of emotions: shock, horror, grief, betrayal, and finally, pure rage. When she spoke again, her voice was cold as steel. "Get out of my house," she told Brandon with absolute finality. "Get out right now and never come back." "Sarah, please," Brandon begged pathetically as Detective Patterson helped him into a shirt and pants. "This is all a terrible misunderstanding. We can work through this together. Think about our future, our plans, everything we've built together." "Future?" Sarah's laugh was bitter and harsh. "You mean the future where my mother is dead and buried while you're spending her inheritance money? That particular future?" As the detectives led Brandon toward the front door in handcuffs, he attempted one final, desperate manipulation. "Sarah, your mother won't live forever anyway. I was simply trying to prepare us for the inevitable reality. You'll understand when you're older, when you see how much the elderly can drain your financial resources and emotional energy. Sarah slapped him across the face. The sound echoed through the hallway like a gunshot. My mother is 67 years old, you absolute psychopath. She could easily live another 20 or 25 years. 20 years you wanted to steal from her, from me, from everyone who loves her. After the police cars finally pulled away from our driveway, Sarah and I sat together in the kitchen where this entire nightmare had originally begun. She was crying uncontrollably, great heaving sobs that shook her entire body. How did I not see what he was? She kept asking through her tears. How could I be so completely blind to his true nature? He was exceptionally skilled at what he did, I said gently. Manipulation is a refined art form, and he'd clearly been practicing it for years before he met you. But you saw through his act completely. I had certain advantages you didn't have, I pointed out. I wasn't emotionally invested in believing he was a good man. And your father taught me to pay careful attention to what people actually do, not what they say. Sarah wiped her eyes with a tissue. I'm so incredibly sorry, Mom. I almost let him completely destroy you. But you didn't, I reminded her firmly. When you saw the real evidence, you believed it immediately. You chose me over him without hesitation. That matters more than you could possibly know. Ray joined us in the kitchen, setting down 3 cups of fresh coffee. Thought you ladies might need some caffeine after this morning. It's been quite an eventful day. What happens to Brandon now? Sarah asked quietly. He's going to trial with overwhelming evidence against him, Ray explained. Text messages, recorded conversations, witness testimony from the pharmacy technician who questioned the unauthorized prescription modifications. He's looking at 25 years to life in prison. And Dr. Peterson. He's cooperating fully with investigators, Ray grinned. Turns out this isn't his first time falsifying commitment papers for desperate family members. Brandon just happened to offer the biggest payday he'd ever seen. 6 months later, I stood in a packed courtroom watching Brandon Hayes receive a sentence of 30 years to life in prison. Dr. Peterson had received 15 years and permanently lost his medical license. Justice, as Frank used to say, wasn't always swift, but it was inevitably thorough when good people worked together. Sarah had filed for divorce the very day after Brandon's arrest. She'd also started intensive therapy to process how she'd been systematically manipulated and to rebuild her ability to trust her own judgment. It was difficult, painful work, but she was making remarkable progress every week. I keep thinking I should have recognized the warning signs, she said, as we walked out of the courthouse together into bright sunshine. There must have been red flags I completely missed. Predators are absolute experts at hiding their true nature, I replied. They study their victims carefully, learn exactly what they want to hear, become precisely what the victim needs them to be. You're not stupid for falling for his act. You're human, and you loved him. The media had picked up our story extensively, and I'd received hundreds of letters from other elderly people who'd experienced similar attempts at financial exploitation by family members. Many came from adult children who'd realized they needed to pay much closer attention to their aging parents' caregivers and companions. Sarah and I had grown closer through this traumatic ordeal than we'd been since she was a young child. She'd moved back into her childhood bedroom while she searched for a new apartment, and we'd fallen into comfortable daily routines. Morning coffee together, evening walks around the neighborhood, long conversations about everything and nothing. Do you think you'll ever be able to trust another man again? I asked her one evening as we sat on the front porch watching a gorgeous sunset. I'm learning to trust myself again first, she said thoughtfully. That's what Dr. Martinez says is most important. If I can trust my own instincts and judgment, then I can gradually start trusting other people again. Your instincts about Brandon were actually correct in the very beginning, I pointed out. You told me once that something felt off about how eager he was to manage all your finances right after you got married. Sarah nodded slowly. But then he explained it so reasonably and logically, said he was naturally good with money and investments, that it made perfect sense for him to handle all the bills and financial planning. Made me feel silly and paranoid for questioning his motives. That's exactly how skilled manipulators operate. They make you doubt your own perfectly valid perceptions and instincts. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching neighbors walk their dogs and children play safely in their front yards. Normal, peaceful life, the kind Brandon had tried to steal from both of us. "Mom," Sarah said eventually. "Yes, sweetheart? Thank you for being smarter and stronger than he was." I laughed genuinely for the first time in months. "Honey, I've been dealing with manipulative, dangerous men since before you were born. Your father was one of the genuinely good ones, but he taught me to recognize and handle the bad ones effectively. Brandon made one absolutely crucial mistake." "What's that?" "He completely underestimated his target. He thought because I was elderly, I was automatically helpless and defenseless. He thought because I seemed confused initially, I was permanently stupid. He thought because I loved my family deeply, I'd sacrifice myself to avoid causing anyone pain or inconvenience. But you fought back harder than he ever expected." "Damn right I did, and I'd do it again in a heartbeat." I reached over and squeezed Sarah's hand firmly. "Nobody gets to steal our lives, sweetheart. Not without one hell of a fight." As the sun set over our quiet Ohio town, I felt something I hadn't experienced in many months. Complete, profound peace. Brandon was exactly where he belonged. Sarah was healing and growing stronger, and I was still here to watch my grandchildren grow up and build their own lives. Frank would have been incredibly proud. His wife hadn't gone down without putting up one spectacular fight, and sometimes, when good people work together, the good guys actually win. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.